Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Todd Klindt's SharePoint podcast number 240, recorded live March 23rd, 2015. My notes say March 2nd, but I don't believe a word of that. I am your host and probably the owner of the only perfect NCAA bracket left. You have to check it out. I guessed them all right. I'm talented. What can I say? But I'm Todd Klindt. And before we go any further, have to do as I always do and thank the fine folks at Rackspace for sponsoring all this. They gave me all this great equipment. They gave me a job. They gave me that flag, that PowerPoint template. That's all them. That's all them. So you can find out about all the great things that we do for SharePoint at sharepoint.rackspace.com. We do a bunch of other great stuff as well, but SharePoint's the cool stuff. So you can see that at sharepoint.rackspace.com. So we'll start out here with our production notes. So last week, Shane and Jonathan did a fine job filling in for me. I listened to a little bit, as much as I could stomach, and it wasn't horrible. Those guys are coming into their own. So I was off spring breaking. I don't mean to rub it in, but I spent my spring break in beautiful, sunny Minneapolis, Minnesota. I know, sounds like bragging. I know, but that's where I was. So those guys took over. I appreciate that for them. The week before that, there was no podcast. Everybody was sick. So I was kind of sick. I'd been sick over the weekend, and I was sick on Monday. So I kind of took the day off, and I sent Shane an email, and I said, hey, I'm on my deathbed. Can you fill in for me tonight? And he said, no, I'm actually on my deathbed as well. So everybody was sick. As far as I know, I didn't give it to him. He's like 600 miles away, so I don't think it's that contagious. But I apologize for that. The last couple of weeks have been crazy, but thanks for sticking in. So now we will move on to the things and stuff part, the content, the reason you guys are all here. And as you can see, I'm wearing my stylish earpiece, and that is a dead giveaway that I have got a guest tonight. So I'm going to do a little intro here, and then I'm going to bring him in. Tonight's guest, well, I don't know if that picture does him justice or not. The lighting's not right. He doesn't look quite regal enough. And that is a friend of mine, Mark Minasi, and Mark's been kind enough to agree to come in here, so I'm going to bring him in. Mark is a friend of mine. We speak at some of the same conferences we met 100 years ago and just been kind of hanging out. And a couple weeks ago, I was talking to Mark on the phone. We were talking about some fun SharePoint stuff that we're going to share with you guys here in a minute. And I'm like, hey, I do this thing. I can make you famous, Mark. I can make you famous. And so he agreed to come on. So Mark, let's check this out. Let's see if this worked. Say something nice to the people.
Hi there, people.
Hey,
Did that come through?
It did.
When this technology stuff works, it's just absolutely amazing, isn't it?
It's so you guys can't appreciate the amount of work. So Mark has not slept in his own bed in many nights. Has only slept on this continent for one night, and through all this travel, he agreed to come onto this. And then you're supposed to be home tonight, but you got stuck. What happened? Because you're not at home.
It's actually a great opportunity. Cyprus is an island in the Mediterranean, and their own country and that sort of thing. And they were having an event, and they wanted me to come out and talk. I'm like, hey, I've never been to Cyprus before. Absolutely beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So the thing is, though, you got to take about like 50 airplanes. Some of them very small, and then there's the burro, and the dinghy for the last part. So that's just
burro's my favorite part. Yeah.
But anyway, so
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Just tell about your. I was just distracted. Go ahead.
No. Just what ended up happening is I was supposed to be moving to Florida, and I thought that by the time they said, "Get the flight nice and early," and so okay, that's great. Do I get it out of Florida, or do I get it out of Virginia Beach, which is where I currently live? Well, this contractor was supposed to have this stuff done for me. He said on October 15th, and with contractors, you've always got to ask what year. And so when I purchased the ticket, I figured, oh, it'll definitely be out of Orlando by then, but not. I said to Delta, can we just, instead of going out of Orlando, could we just go out of Virginia Beach? And they're like, yes, for $10,000. I said, you're kidding. No, seriously. $10,000. So I had to buy a ticket from Norfolk to then fly to Atlanta, and from there to Orlando early on to make the flight out. As you can see, it'll just, of course, they lost the bags, and it was just but anyway. But I'm back. I'm back in the USSA, and it's I can't, you don't know how lucky you are, boy. So,
I heard something.
And
about
I am so pleased to be on a SharePoint thing because I don't know that SharePoint will read my stuff. I mean, I suppose they've got to get the servers up and running.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. So let's give you a proper intro. So Mark has been kind of the Windows IT Pro go-to guy for a long time. I don't want to make you feel old, but for a long time. And I was going through the massive Klindt library today, and I found this little number right here.
Is that right? Mastering Windows Server 2003. Yep, that was the peak. Yes, it is. We were still buying books in those days. Still buying books made out of trees. And it was still okay. You could still sell books. The rule in those days, this is like from 95 to about 2005, is that if you drop the book on your foot and it doesn't break a toe, it's not big enough. That seemed to be the rule at the time. But those were simpler days, sir, because there was a time when I knew everything about NT. This is before back office appears and that sort of thing. But I mean, man, when you guys set up SharePoint, that's just the beginning, and then you've got 5,000 service packs to apply, and as well as SQL and all those other fun things. So my hat's off to all you guys for getting that stuff done. And it enabled me to play with some very cool stuff. The audience does not know that our friend Todd is a very selfless and helpful guy, and I needed to do some research really quickly about Office 365, because here's my shtick. My shtick was I was asked to do a talk about Office 365, and I thought what would be fun is I've had Office 365 since, I don't know, like 2.5, 3 years ago. And I bought it for the same reason I think most people buy Office 365, is they want cheap exchange. And it is. They're cheap mailboxes. It's very reliable. Touch wood. I've never had the thing down when I needed it. It was just all good. But they changed some things up. So I had gotten the cheapest SKU, and this SKU is going to be, this is was the small business SKU. And basically all it gave you was email and some other stuff, but mostly it was for email. Well, they got rid of that, and they have a new SKU called Business Essentials. And when you look at it, it is the Enterprise E1 SKU, but it's $5 a month rather than $8 a month. So it's absolutely astounding. Yeah, going from small business, which is being phased out anyway, to Business Essentials was fantastic. And I thought, there's all these things that I'm not playing with. I thought it'd be really cool to figure out, well, it's like, what are all these things? And the first one was OneDrive for Business. Now, I was talking to Todd because I know diddly about SharePoint. But I know that you get SharePoint free with Office 365, and I didn't know whether there was a reason why no one was using it, because I couldn't find anyone, no documented cases at all of anyone actually using SharePoint as part of their Office 365. But it seemed like a good idea. What's that?
Our poor SharePoint, our poor unloved SharePoint.
Hey, I'm coming to love it. It's taken a while, but I'm coming to love it. The big reason I've never done anything with SharePoint is that it looks like a 15-day excursion to get the server working in the first place, and then from there you got to figure out what you can do with it. The nice thing about this, of course, is that because it's SharePoint Online, I just turn the button on and it's there. But what was exciting was that you had talked to me about some of the things that everybody listening in knows about, stuff like workflows and all those kinds of goodies, which I didn't have too much knowledge of, but wanted to play with. The first thing I looked at was OneDrive for Business. And I got to tell you, this is a talk I put together. I did it in Cyprus last week, and because I like to do talks where you've already spent some money, and you're not using most of what you paid for. So I'm going to show you the hidden gold. So the idea is, whatever cost it is that you've already laid out, I want you to get the most for your money. I do talks like that. And so finding the Office 365 Gold was not terribly hard at all, because we start, first of all, from OneDrive for Business. I wish they hadn't called it OneDrive for Business. I honestly had not looked at it at all, because that OneDrive that you get with your live account is so freaking lame. It's an example. OneDrive, the regular one, not the business, all that is an FTP site with a web front end. Now that's what I call a GWAC. That stands for G, we're a cloud. And an FTP site with a web front end on it, it's still a friggin' FTP site. It's not a cloud, But in any case, OneDrive for Business is a wholly different animal. I mean, it looks a little like the other OneDrive, but what it actually is, dawned on me eventually, is it's SharePoint for dummies. And what they've done is that they have made it super simple to, first of all, get the versioning stuff, which I've always loved. I mean, my friends who do SharePoint, I'm like, that's what I want. Every time I save a PowerPoint, it's a draft. There's 5 billion of them that are sitting around out there. It's hard to really screw up with all those kinds of things. Really wanted it, but again, too much trouble. I'm not as smart as everybody listening here, so setting up SharePoint would have been too difficult. OneDrive for Business, one click, bam, and you get in the versioning. So you get the versioning. You can have the major and minor numbers, which again your audience understands, and we can publish. Once you get to a milestone, you can publish. And it was just super dead simple and really cool. So it was like phase 1. That's I'm doing something for myself. And then phase 2 was, well, maybe I don't get to decide whether it should be published or not. So right now, in the model where I'm the only person in the universe, then I could say, I like this. This is going to be good enough for the Cypress talk or something like that. But what if I'm working and you're my boss and you decide whether it's actually ready for prime time or not? So what happens there is I publish it, but a workflow kicks off. One of those cool and very complicated looking workflow things becomes easy as pie. And so at that point, you get the email kicked out to Todd, and he looks it over, and he either gives it, the thumbs up or the thumbs down, and it gets from pending published to published, or no, that ain't ready, we're unpublishing this Minasi. And then the third step's collaboration, and as you know, depending on what version of Office you've got, you can do some pretty cool stuff there too. So what was neat about this was OneDrive for Business is essentially all the SharePoint goodies, but without any brains required at all. And that was extremely convenient. So
yeah,
yeah.
And you mentioned the naming thing, and the naming thing is something that has sucked for a while. So for the longest time, one of my most popular blog posts was one where I described the difference between SkyDrive and SkyDrive Pro, because that was what the incarnation was before Microsoft rolled over for the UK. SkyDrive Pro was OneDrive for Business, and at the time I remember thinking they could not possibly find a worse name for this than SkyDrive Pro. They showed me that challenge accepted is what I heard from Building 16. So yeah, and it's still very confusing, and I think the team's working on that. They've got some gold there with OneDrive, and like you talked about, it's a great little taste of SharePoint. It gets people doing things they'd already be doing, but that just happens to be SharePoint, and then they can, oh my God, look at this, I can do versioning. And I think they're working on the clients. The sync client, you probably haven't worked with it enough yet to realize some of the specialness that it has, like where it doesn't sync or it loses versions. I mean,
I actually did figure that out. When I did my talk in Cyprus last week, this one woman came up to me and said, "You saved me." I said, "Well, why?" I said, "If OneDrive for Business is annoying you, go find groove.exe and stop that." That's and I heard like a squeal from the back, and she came up front and says, "You saved me." So yeah. The OneDrive for Business, I don't know if I don't remember if I downloaded it or it's a native part of 8.1. I think it's a native part of 8.1. It may be that one layer is on top of the other. Certainly with Windows 10, there's an integrated one, and everyone hates it. But yeah, it'll just sit there and say, I'm syncing. What are you syncing about? Right? And that's anyway.
Yeah, so I think, and this is where the name.
But it works. It's great.
I think OneDrive, and the other thing that you'll love is, and I don't know if I told you this when we were talking or not, but some of my friends have gotten the whole OneDrive and OneDrive for Business thing. The naming's always ugly, so they refer to it as OneDrive for Business and OneDrive for Pleasure. So I find myself reverting to those names. So the OneDrive for Pleasure client is built into Windows 8. The OneDrive for
Business Drive and Pleasure Drive.
That's yes. The way you think. And wait till the Skype renaming comes up. Then it really gets fun. Skype for Business, and but the OneDrive for Business client comes down when you do the Office 365 Office install. So like when the Word and the Excel and all that stuff.
Okay. So you're saying that you're getting your software from your Office 365 account. I didn't go for the with Office version, so okay. I had to go find that at downloads. Microsoft.com/downloads.
Yeah, yeah, and they do have a standalone client for it too, but that's normally where people get, especially in the scenario you're talking about, where they're doing Office 365 and they're doing, they're putting the thing in and they get Word and Excel, and then the other stuff just kind of trickles in as they need it, and they don't have to worry about it, which is great, especially for people like my mom and all that.
Well, it worked pretty well, and the problem with being outside of the country, of course, is that all of a sudden it's 1985 again, because you can kind of use your cell phone. Serious. I am totally serious. I gave AT&T my $60 so that I could have Passport Plus or whatever the heck it was, 300 megs of data. Data becomes cheap. Well, I'm using it for a couple of hours, and I get an urgent message from AT&T, stop using it. I'm like, why? They said, well, because Cypress isn't included, and so it's going to cost you $20 a megabyte. Immediate bankruptcy.
Yeah, so I had an experience like that. I was on Sprint 5 years ago, and I was getting ready to go over to Europe for 3 weeks. So I was doing teaching a class in Amsterdam. I was doing Tech Ed Tech Ed in Berlin in 2009, I think, and it's been a week in Stockholm. So I called Sprint, asked the same question, and the woman tells me, she's like, yeah, we have this international package. She's like, we can meter the data, or you can spend like $80, which again back then was a whole bunch of money, and get unlimited data. So I'm like, sign me up, unlimited data. So the whole time I'm over there, I'm tethering through my phone, because I'm not going to pay 14 euros a day for internet access or whatever, because I got this $80 thing. I get my phone bill for that month, $5,600. So this whole unlimited data package, apparently not unlimited, and so I mean it was just
the amount they could charge you was unlimited.
Yeah, that was
the unlimited part.
So it was one of those things. I opened that up and I saw that number, and it was just surreal. I'm like, there is no way I'm sending Sprint a check for $5,600. The thing that saved me was when I'd gotten to Amsterdam, my phone the data didn't work right away, and I'd gotten into a chat session and had told that and said, hey, I'm supposed to have this unlimited data thing, and the person in the chat window agreed that I was supposed to have it, and I had a screenshot of that, and so when they came after me, they're like, oh, no, you got to pay for it. I'm like, go to this guy. So ever since then, I've been super sensitive of international data, because I got scared. So then the funny thing was, the next month I was going to India for a week. So I called Sprint to turn it on, and I asked about the packages, and the guy on the phone's like, well, here's the story. Go ahead and turn this on. Tell them I told you it was unlimited, and then we'll just refund the charges. And I'm like, you guys fell for that last month. I can't see you falling for it 2 months in a row. It was crazy. So I know what it's like traveling. You get crazy about that.
Well, the point I was making, though, was that did mean that there was times that I wasn't on the internet. And I found I had pretty good luck with the sync tool. I could see where it could be better. It could be better.
There's a lot of room for improvement, is the way was it partner opportunities, I think, is how Microsoft likes to refer to that. But it's getting better. And so you talked a little bit about the Windows 10 OneDrive for Pleasure client and how people are hating it. And the big change they made was the placeholder things. And so and I don't know if everybody in the audience listens to that, so I'll explain it for them. In Windows 8 and 8.1, everything that shows up in OneDrive shows up as placeholders, like little shadow files inside of your file system. And then as you use the files, as you click it, Windows downloads it in the background and makes it available to you, which I thought was genius. I loved it. Because one of the problems, I use Dropbox a lot, and one of the problems I have is if I don't sync a folder, I forget where stuff's at. I can't find it. So this fixed that. The problem, though, is apparently they had a lot of problems with applications in the background not understanding that. And so in Windows 10, they took that out, and a lot of people, like myself, kind of got used to that.
I had heard them putting it back in, but I don't know. I've heard that there had been a hue and cry that an angry mob had gone to the program manager's house with torches and pitchforks and convinced him or her that it was time to get it back the way that it was. So that was, so that was the first thing. That was like, this is stuff, great stuff in Office 365 that that you should be making use of. And again, the first thing that I would say to you is that if you are paying for Enterprise E1 right now, first thing to do is see if Business Essentials will do it for you. It is almost exactly the same as Enterprise E1. It's $3 less per mailbox per month, so that's a definitely better. The only real cap is if you have more than 300 people, then you can't do it. But that's that's a lot of small businesses are under 300 people, so that's
Sure.
a pretty gosh darn good deal. So that's something to look at. The and the rest of it's obviously there's a big lump in SharePoint, and I'm learning stuff there. So
We're proud of you.
I notice it's not the fastest thing in the world. The SharePoint online, it's kind of slow point. You kind of click and little wheels go around and that sort of thing, and just. But what's really exciting was that they're trying to make this a better collaboration platform, but they fail miserably in one way. And the first way is, so let's imagine that you're not some rack-based employee. You're just like, right? And so you've got an Office 365 domain. Well, you would think that if I've got an O365 domain and you've got one, we should be able to do stuff like really share calendars. And I mean really share calendars. I should be able to make you an editor, a owner, an author, all that kind of stuff. And you can't. It's insane. There's no way to build an enterprise trust or a federated trust between two different Office 365 domains, which is for the use like this, which is just plain crazy. I'm hoping that one day we'll see something like ADFS as a service, just something you can turn on with Azure and it costs $5 a month or something along those lines. Part of it's Exchange, because as you know, even with Exchange, if you've got a couple of federated trusts, you still can't do a tremendous amount in terms of just using calendar sharing as the example, because that really is that's the big one. That's
right.
Along those lines, though, they've got in the last year they've introduced the idea of an Office 365 group. It's kind of sort of like a distribution group, but with a distribution group, let's say we have a distribution group for some project. Well, if you're on the group, you get the mails for the group. But if you come in later, you're 4 months in, you don't get the old conversations. The Office 365 groups give you that, though. So that acts like that. They have calendars, they have a shared calendar, and blah, 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 which is interesting because that kind of does good collaboration inside your domain. But then there's this other question of why do they also have Yammer? Yammer Enterprise appears to be the same thing as Office 365 groups, and they both came out at the same time. So you definitely get that. This is a turf battle that no one won, including us, or something like that.
Yeah. The Yammer thing is weird. So as most folks know, Yammer was an acquisition that Microsoft made a couple of years ago, and it was odd because I didn't understand what it was going to do, and it felt like Microsoft didn't either. And the integration into SharePoint is weak to hilarious at best. And then there seems to be this stuff like the groups that just came out here in the last couple of months. So it's very confusing even for those of us who are really involved.
Well, Yammer's not bad. It's like having a private Facebook. And that's essentially the way that it works, is that there's this multiverse of Yammer, and within it there might be people from Acme Corporation wanting to talk about Acme. Well, the way that we keep the Exxon guys from not listening to the Acme conversations and so on is that they're just called groups once again, because we don't yet have we didn't have enough use of the word, and so they're complicated too. And so if you think of it as this multiverse just always growing and creating little universes inside of it, then you get access to the ones that you've got to handle. There's some fairly decent conversations. If you think about it, when I first saw SharePoint, back in 1897 or when it first came out, then one of the baked-in examples was a forum. The idea was that you could have a discussion threads in a forum. I don't know if SharePoint still does this or whether SharePoint ever became big on it, but back in like 2003, 2004, then you'd see that as baked in. And Yammer's kind of taking that job. Yammer's not perfect for it because it's very hard to archive a good discussion offline.
Yeah. So the forums that you saw in SharePoint 2003, I am certain are code identical to the forums in SharePoint 2013. I don't think it's been changed. I think the problem with Yammer is, again, nobody knew at least from the SharePoint side, nobody knew what it was supposed to do. And it's got some pretty glaring problems. Like if you're the members of multiple networks, some of the clients don't handle that very well. One bug that a buddy of mine discovered about a year ago is, so we all have whatever our first network was in Yammer. So, like there's a Yammer group for Ignite speakers, for instance. So if that's the Yammer group that you first signed up for, that's kind of your home group. what happens is if that network is ever deleted, you are deleted, and every trace of you is deleted from Yammer.
Well,
Yeah.
I haven't run up against that one yet. Thank you. I guess I'll have to remain a directory services MVP forever then. Otherwise I'll lose my Yammerness.
Yeah. So this buddy of mine, he was speaking at a SharePoint Saturday event, SharePoint Saturday, Gary, Indiana, I don't know what it was. And he had signed up for that, and that's how he got into Yammer, and then the MVP groups and all these things. And then whoever was in charge of SharePoint Saturday, Gary, got tired of it and deleted the network, and overnight my buddy just vanished and had no idea why. And everything he had done, gone. So there's just little things like that that make Yammer tough to, and trying to find anything in Yammer is impossible.
Well, you can see why. I mean, they really don't want the different networks to be able to talk to each other.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, because that leakage would be bad. Exxon overhearing conversations of Amico would be,
yes,
would be bad.
Bad with a capital B and a little trademark at the end. Yeah, very very bad.
That's exactly right.
One thing I will say, so some of the stuff that you've talked about with Office 365, like the being able to talk between tenants, like 3 years ago, so Rackspace bought SharePoint 911, the company that I worked for, a little over 3 years ago. And I was an on-prem guy. I laughed at the cloud. I mocked it heartily. And these were the days of Business Productivity Services Online, or BPAS, the online SharePoint 2007. Very easy to make fun of. Then went to work for Rackspace, a hosting company, and decided, this cloud thing might be kind of cool after all. kind of had my come to Jesus moment with that. But then making fun of Office 365 was still pretty easy. There was a lot of really low-hanging fruit. And in the last couple of years, Microsoft has done a great job tightening all that up.
I think the classic example was it came out in, 2011 or something like that. I think it was 2011. And my immediate comment was, okay, so if this is mid-2011, will Office 365 work on February 29th next year? And Azure went down that day. I was talking to one Microsoft guy. He says, "This is your fault." I say, "Hey, all I did was protect it."
I tried to warn you.
Exactly, and you guys were not set. But I mean, honestly, look, if all we did was Exchange, it would be enough. It's a good implementation of Exchange. It's reliable stuff. It's relatively fast. I haven't been able to push it over and hurt it. So, I mean, I'm sure there are Exchange people who would like more control. And there's also situations where if you're in love with some add-on, some archiving thing or some fax doodad or something like that, then you're not going to get that. But if all you're looking for is just the generic mailbox, then it works. We were talking about Yammer though, because a good thing came out of Yammer. Now we talk about a thing called a graph, like the Facebook graph. What is that all about? It's basically the network. So if you think about you're in Facebook maybe, and you've got all your friends. So there's like lines that go from you to your friends, and each of your friends have friends. So you got stars with stars, just coming out. The whole value of Facebook, the only reason anybody thinks it's worth 5 cents, is that knowing that Todd's got 500 friends, but he really only interacts and likes posts by like 17 of them, and these are the kinds of things that Todd. I mean, all these things are things that they can sell. And you probably know that Facebook does this stuff. I mean, if I happen to mention that I just love, I don't know, XYZ mustard, then that can be used by that company. That's trademarked, not owned by me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the graph, it's called a graph because it is a network. But technically, in network theory, if you're going to MIT and taking math classes and this sort of thing, that's always been called graph theory. And I think that they grabbed the word graph for a simple reason. We use network for too many other things. Sure. So when you say graph, you say the Facebook graph. Everybody knows what you're talking about. And what that means is we have a map of the relationships of the objects, which is going to be people in this cases. We also know that Todd interacts with these objects a lot. Those interact. These ones not so much. He tends to like the following sorts of things. He's quiet about these other sorts of things. So we know a lot of things about you. Well, that's all lovely, and I'm sure the NSA has that information, and cares about it. But so what Yammer did was Yammer had Yammer Graph, and so back before Microsoft bought it, they still had the graph. And the notion here was going to be that within each of those networks, within each of those groups, then there was a graph that said, okay, there's like maybe 500 members in this particular discussion group, and how do they interact with each other, and how, I mean, the same things that you're asking with Facebook. But that information is kept only within Yammer, and it's only kept within your organization. So it's, it's Microsoft spying on you, but they're not using the data. Trust them, okay? And so the Yammer graph became, they said, we should be doing this with Office 365. And so there's an Office graph. And so within your Office 365 domain, they're doing some pretty cool stuff. So if we imagine, let's get science fiction here, okay? If we're really using the living crap out of Office 365, then what are we doing? When we have a project, we create an Office 365 group. We now know the people who are in that. Those people, what else is in 365? My Exchange, my calendar, my emails. So now what does it know? It knows things like, well, let's see, Todd works with Susan on some project, and with Jack on the same project, but he interacts more with Susan than he does with Jack. And maybe that there are files sitting in OneDrive for Business that are then associated with that project. Oh, the project has a calendar. So it also knows, so the graph knows where your milestones are going to be. And so it's then able to start saying, hey, wait a minute, there's some stuff we can get out of here. The first application that lives on top of it is called Delve. And Delve will astoundingly underwhelm you when you first see it. But I think give it 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times, and I think it's going to be really interesting. What it does is that if it knows, it builds a dashboard. It says, oh, listen, I see Todd's got a meeting today, and it's from that group, and so Susan's going to be there, and Jack's going to be there, and these are the files they've been using. And you get these little things that look like old Polaroids, these cards, little white edges on them, where it's got documents. Could be a face, could be a picture. It could be a PowerPoint. It could be a Word document. It's like, you name it, any of those things. And so it's trying with this dashboard to organize things for you. It's a lot wonky now. Here's what I want. Here's what I want to see though. I have become a complete and total OneNote addict. I just love OneNote. All you Evernote people, just sit down, okay? But no, actually, they're both great tools. Because I do so much Microsoft stuff, OneNote is so well integrated with the Microsoft tools.
I agree.
If OneNote knew about Office Graph, then I could just never leave the house, because it would just know everything what I need to know, and it'd be hooked up to Amazon grocery service or something like that.
The drones would drop here.
I would never, exactly, I'd never have to leave the house, So it's some interesting science fiction-y stuff. I mean, will it turn out to be something useful? I think it could be cool. It could be the circulatory system. It could be the nerve, the neural net for your organization.
Yeah. So one thing, I love the crap out of OneNote, and for those, for the 7 of us, you and I included, that use Windows Phone, the Office Lens application that drops stuff into OneNote and OCRs.
It's awesome.
Can't say enough good things about it. Office Graph, before it came out, its code name was Oslo, and it was developed in Oslo, and that came out of the Fast Search folks. And so underneath, it's all these crazy. So Microsoft bought Fast in 2009, right before SharePoint 2010 came out, and it was there was this weird bolting together of the product, kind of a Frankenstein thing. But I did some work with the Fast product before it became part of SharePoint, and it was amazing how intelligent that search product was. Things like, so in SharePoint, we've always been able to tag stuff. So we've been able to say, okay, we've got cities, and this document has a city in it, it mentions Munich or whatever. Fast is smart enough that it could go through documents and figure all those things out. Say, hey, there's a number in here. This looks like income, and add tag. I mean, just crazy stuff, and that was 10 years ago. So thinking of all the smarts that are behind it now is just astounding.
No, it's fun stuff. It really is. It's some of the science fiction-y stuff that we've been being promised. The idea that our data gets more intelligent and that sort of thing. And so instead of just getting a new visualization tool, yet another Excel thing that creates pretty graphs, it kind of takes it a step beyond that.
Yeah, and one of the things about Delve and the Office Graph is they're Office 365 only. They will never be on-prem versions of that. So that's one of the ways that they're pulling folks into the cloud, that all that stuff only works in Office 365.
I would say to anyone at this point, I've been so happy, if you're a small organization, you don't feel like running your email, or you don't have oddball needs of some kind, do give it a look. I mean, if nothing else, the Exchange capabilities are just just terrific, you know. And the other thing too that Office 365, you know, I never understood OneDrive. It's like SkyDrive never made sense to me. Like, who gives a crap? There's not that much space. You know, what made me change that? Windows 8, Windows 8.1, because now all of a sudden, right? Windows 8.1 and OneNote. Now all of a sudden, as you said, everything. I have a packing list when I'm going to go on a trip. I'm sure you relate to this. Is there must have been a time that you got on a plane and you're set down, you're in the hotel, and you realize I forgot to bring a belt for my suit, you know, or I don't know, just some adapter.
For me, it's my favorite Spider-Man underoos, but yeah, same idea. Yeah.
Do you present in your Spider-Man underoos?
You know, sometimes.
I know there are things that man was not meant to know.
Depends on how much confidence I need. You know, if I've done that session before. do that power pose thing they tell you to do. You know.
I have shaken your hand sometimes, and they always seem a little sticky. So that must be the web stuff or something like that.
That's what we'll stick with. Yeah, that was.
Anyway, so this is neat because I've had this list. It's been around for ages. Implementing it on OneNote was a piece of cake because you can even do little check boxes and stuff. So the sexy thing is, just to give you an idea, it's a stupid sounding example, but it's really cool. First thing I do is I pack my bag, the laptop bag, and there's a sub list that does that. Well, I'm doing that while I'm sitting in my office, which means I'm sitting on the real honest-to-God computer and I'm typing away on the keyboard. Well, then it's time to go pack the clothes. Well, that's sitting over in my bedroom and the iPad's there. And when I open the iPad, it already knows which things have been checked and have not been checked. So that's why it seems to me that I'm hoping that the next version of Office Graph will be able to start reading and understanding OneNote notebooks. That would be truly amazing.
So for me, I've been using Dropbox for forever. I've been paying $100 a year to get the stuff, and had the same problems that you did with SkyDrive. There wasn't enough space. You couldn't sync certain types of files. You couldn't have files over 2 gig, which for a while when I was doing this podcast, I would sync video files and they would get over 2 gig sometimes. But 8.1, like you said, the way it was integrated and some of the ways that it started showing it for me was like the way it uses OneDrive to sync all your Internet Explorer stuff. So all my favorites are the same everywhere. All my passwords are the same everywhere. And one of the things that creeped me out the first time is how it saves all your wireless network passwords. So there was a time, and I don't remember what it was. I had my tablet or something. I was at my in-laws' house, hooked up to their wireless, and then came back, a couple weeks later and had my phone and looked down and it was connected to their wireless. And I'm like, oh, that's creepy. How did it know that? And so they're making good use of it, and that's kind of started to win me over.
And here's another thing too. I just stumbled across this. I'm not supposed to have it, but I do anyway. They have the Office 365 video. Now, what's interesting about this is that it's kind of straightforward. First sense that it's like having a YouTube for your organization, and you upload a video. And of course, video is going to be fair size. That gets taken out of your SharePoint. That's a SharePoint site. And so, again, SharePoint sites, it's amazing, isn't it, that OneDrive for Business has a maximum storage of 200 terabytes free. But then when you go to SharePoint, which essentially it is, every SharePoint site only gets 10 gigabytes. And you can, of course, purchase more if you'd like to do that. Those are numbers that need tweaking, I think,
Yeah, and there's so a lot of that's vestigial. Like up till recently, the max file size was 2 gig, and that's because of the 32-bit int thing, because of SQL, because of whatever stuff that we were dealing with in 1996, and they're finally getting that worked out. So I'm sure they'll get there. Like I said, they've made a lot of progress in the last year with OneDrive and all the pieces that revolve around that.
So here's the cool part. So you have a video. Let's say this video is a couple of gigabytes in size. You upload it. That's all the storage you get charged. Now Azure has these back-end multimedia services, and it like instantaneously takes this video and redoes it in every codec you can think, for every size, form factor you could imagine. It's unbelievable. It's like if some weird-ass phone and you want to watch one of your videos, it has already done that. So it's pretty exciting stuff. I say I shouldn't have it because their table says that Business Essentials doesn't get that capability. It has shown up on my screen though, so I don't know whether we're just rolling it out or they're just teasing me. That's another thing too, by the way. if you are thinking you want to play with Delve, Delve is being slowly rolled out. So don't freak out if you don't have Delve. Apparently, Delve is on the way.
Yeah, and I think there's a way to request it. I don't remember because I'm like you being an MVP and all that. I get they let us try some of these things out, so I've lost track of what I bought. I've got 47 Office 365 tenants. I swear, I've got like 17 OneDrives in Explorer. Someone is saying that Azure stuff is great for cat videos and videos of sneezing pandas. And honest to God, if there was ever a question whether the internet was worth it or not, one video of a sneezing panda and it's worth whatever I'm paying a month for internet access.
I have not actually seen a sneezing panda video, but now I have something to Google when our conversation is over. I just posted the other day that I thought the best add-on. Let me give you some examples of things that make the world better. The post office. We're trying to figure out the post office. If I could give them, I don't know, how about $200 a year to never deliver anything to resident or occupant? Wouldn't that be money you pay? Think the post office wouldn't have to move as much stuff around, and they'd be making the extra money, and you don't have to go to the mailbox once a week.
Yeah, the problem is they sell the postage to send that to you to other people for way more than the $200 a year that you would give them.
I think if everyone did it, though, for $500 a year, let me just blacklist people. The only people I accept from these are my.
Yep. I'm excited to see on the Office 365 bandwagon because I'm curious to see what pieces of it you latch onto because there's so many great pieces. I know. So I think it was not last year at TechEd. Maybe it was last year at TechEd. It was Houston, right? So we had dinner that one night with John Craddock, and earlier that week he and I were talking about Office 365 and all that, and he's an identity guy. So for those of you that haven't seen John's stuff, he's a British guy, does a bunch of identity stuff. And all the weird and fun identity things that he's been doing are now starting to work into Azure and Office 365 and on-prem SharePoint. And that's just a whole new world of fun stuff for us IT pros to play with.
Yeah, Craddock is a super smart guy, particularly in the infrastructure level. Like if you have to set up ADFS, something like that, he is the man. He's actually doing a class in London, I believe, in a few months, June, I think it is. So anyway, the point I was making about great ideas that need to be implemented, I would pay Facebook $10 a year to block all cat pictures. See, this seems to me that here's a moneymaker right here, But, so that's where your cat videos, yeah.
Yeah. So
I heard there's a video of a cat riding on a Roomba. It's astounding. I'll have to go look that up.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's 5 million of those.
I've seen multiples of those. Yeah. So I can't remember. So speaking of conferences, have we talked? I know before this we talked about it, but have we talked about on the podcast here what you're doing at Ignite? What
I don't think so. So Ignite, which is happening in early May in Chicago.
Yeah.
The city of steakhouses. And
thank God.
So I'm doing a talk with Mark Rusinovich. So my buddy Dr. Rusinovich and I are going to get up on stage, and I'm going to ask him embarrassing questions about the cloud. Now that he's no longer merely a technical fellow, he's now CTO, Chief Technical Officer of Azure, or it's Azure. I keep getting corrected.
I can remember when it was him and Cogswell cranking out little utilities here and there, defrag manager and all that.
Still doing those things.
Our boys all grown up.
Well, we should have some fun because we did this in Houston. I don't know if you were there, but it was just Mark and Mark talking about the cloud. And I think we filled the room up like 20 minutes before they had to close doors and turn people away, and they were very, very unhappy. Many very unhappy. So I'm hoping that we'll have a bigger room and see how that works. And then the Windows team, the desktop team, has asked me to do a couple talks. So I'm going to do a couple talks on the new management stuff for Windows 10. So it's an evolution. What they're doing is they're trying to move us in the direction of, Windows 10 is going to be an odd bird in the sense that, in theory, it is the last Windows. And that what happens at this point is just Windows Update just changes as time goes on.
Yeah, and that's and I've talked about that on this podcast a little bit. They've said, for the first year, everybody running Windows 7 or Windows 8 will have the opportunity to upgrade to Windows 10 for free.
Even the pirated copies.
Yeah, and then last week they said even the pirated ones. But one of the weird caveats of that, and it didn't get a lot of press, but something that the guys like you and I notice, is that part of that whole free upgrade is that they will force you to take all the Windows updates. So if you take that free Windows 10 upgrade, it kind of locks you into getting all those immediate builds. So it gets everybody on those rolling, upgrade things, because that's clearly where their head is. That's where everything's at these days. But that was one of the glimpses of that's going to happen.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Whether the world chooses to adopt Windows 10 is, I guess, an open question. It's one of those things where Microsoft needs to understand that in the 50s, when people bought cars, they knew they were good for 3 years, and that was it, maybe 5. But now cars are reliable to the point where, if I had a car in the 70s, when it hit 70,000 miles, I didn't trust it anymore. By the time you rolled the odometer, forget about it. Get rid of that thing. Whereas now, if you buy a car, you fully expect that if you want to, you can hang on it 12, 16 years, something like that. You may not want to. You may want to trade that in for a new car, but there's not a technological reason why you can't keep a car in the same way. With Windows 95, they didn't put a gun to our heads and say, you must upgrade to Windows 95. No, people were lined up outside the stores to buy the stupid thing because they really wanted it. The demand drove it rather than pushing people off of operating systems. We have that similar problem now. Is that they've got to understand if you're going to build a more reliable operating system, you're going to expect people to use it for longer. They're going to use it for 10 years. They're going to use it for 15 years. You should be patting yourself on the back. Now, how they do that revenue model, I have no idea. But
yeah, that will remain to be seen. And you talk about cars. That's exactly right. My last 3 or 4 cars have had remote start, and you just hit a button and the thing fires up. And my first car was a '77 Mercury Marquis, and that thing wouldn't start under the best of circumstances with a human in there pulling this and tugging that and pushing that. And now I hit a button and my car starts in my garage. So yeah, it's come a long way.
So the important question is going to be, are people going to go with it? People like Windows 7. They really do. Windows 7 is this decade's XP, and getting people off of it. It's a fairly short cycle, if I remember correctly. Aren't they lessening some of the support at 5 years and then pretty much pulling it at 10? I've forgotten the details, but it's much earlier than seems reasonable.
Yeah, and I think the free upgrade is a big piece of that. And I think, so I don't know how you were, but when I embraced Windows 7, Windows 8 came out, and I hated it. I didn't install it anywhere. I tried it a couple of times and just abhorred it. 8.1 came out, and they fixed all the stuff that I didn't like about 8, so I embraced 8. I'm in no hurry to get off 8.1, honestly.
Right.
So we'll see what 10. Now I've got 10 running on a few things. I don't have 10 running on some of my smaller tablets because it hasn't really grabbed there. But I've got it running on a couple of my laptops and all that. Seems pretty good. So we'll see. Hopefully but Windows 8 had such a bad name. And even years later, I talked to people. They're like, I was going to buy a new machine. There's no way I'm getting that Windows 8 crap on it. I'm like, it's not crap. It's fine. I can spend 4 minutes with you with your Windows 8.1 box, and you will have no problems. 4 minutes.
Just learn a few Windows keys. That's all.
So I think that will be the thing. I think technically it's going to be fine. It's the stigma of it looking Windows 8.1-ish that's going to throw people off. So we'll see. Well, we're coming up on 48 minutes here. So I know that you're an hour ahead of me. I know I'm getting tired. What other stuff do you talked about Ignite? You got anything else going on?
Be doing PowerShell classes. My problem is that I'm behind on a lot of things. So I'm going to start rolling out my PowerShell classes again to a nice Active Directory PowerShell class. And of course, when Windows 10 arrives this summer, I'm hoping to have my support class put together by then. So
excellent. Where can
by the site?
Yeah, where can folks find you?
Just on my site, www.minasi.com. That's right. Minasi.
And you're at mminasi on Twitter. And I can't remember, do you do any Pluralsight or any of that kind of stuff?
I've done a number of Pluralsight videos. They've done some nice play-by-plays. I got a chance to sit down with Rusinovich for an hour, and we did one there. And then I got to do a really fun one with Snover, with Jeff Snover. He was supposed to stay an hour with us. He stayed about 2 hours talking about GIA, the Just Enough Administration stuff. It's a tool whereby you need to be able to administer something in SharePoint, and you're not that smart. And so I want to be able to give you something that's like just this is imaginary, Todd, not real Todd.
No, you nailed it.
I can create a universe where you don't have to be a domain admin, which is in order to get anything done. So that's some really cool stuff. And Snover and I got a chance to do a couple of hours on that. I just put one together about clusters. So I've got a great one that pretty much says, if you've been ignoring clusters for years, well, of course, they didn't make much sense, but that's changed with 2012 and 2012 R2, and then everybody's got no clusters. So this is your catch-up. It's like, just 90 minutes you'll need to know. You've got everything you need to know about how to get smart about clusters, and that's coming out on Pluralsight pretty soon. Not out just yet.
Yeah, and Pluralsight's and I don't know how many folks that are listening subscribe to that. Pluralsight's a great training thing. You pay a monthly fee, and it has got everything out there, all the topics, all the great.
Soup to nuts.
Yeah.
Soup to nuts, $30 a month.
Yeah, it's
not a bad deal at all.
It's great stuff. Outstanding. Well, Mark, thanks so much. I know this was a lot of work for you when we were trying to get things set up ahead of time.
Great pleasure. Always fun. Always fun, Todd.
And I'll catch up with you here in a month and a half. I'll see you in Chicago, and we'll catch up then.
Let's definitely do that. Thank you, pal.
You bet.
Thanks. Everybody.
All right. Thanks. All right. So that was great. Like I said, I don't mean to be a name dropper. Mark's been a friend of mine for quite a few years now. We chat, and getting him on the show was pretty exciting. So thanks go out to him. One of the things, and I meant to mention it in the when he was on, but I forgot, is way back in the day when getting Kerberos set up was still a problem and still challenging. I sat in on one of his Kerberos sessions, and it had nothing to do with SharePoint. Nothing. It was just Kerberos, and that cracked it open for me. I never had any problems with Kerberos after that. Just listening to his Kerberos talk was it. So it was good to have him there. So I think it's kind of going to be all downhill from there. I did want to do some shameless self-promotion before we leave. Here in a month, I'm going to be in London at the SharePoint Evolution Conference, and very excited about that. Steve Smith puts on a tremendous conference. It's one I've wanted to do forever, and got asked this year. Just kind of, I saw Steve over in Stockholm last year, and I'm like, hey, if you got a slot for a guy from Iowa to talk about SharePoint, I would love to be that guy. And he graciously agreed. So I'm doing my upgrade session, a 2-part session, and that is Wednesday morning at the SharePoint Evolution Conference. So if you're in Europe, hopefully you've already signed up for it, but you can go to SharePointEvolutionConference.com and sign up for that. There will not be a greater SharePoint-only conference anywhere in the world this year. It's just that good. And then a couple weeks after that, myself and Mark and a whole bunch of other people. So in the chat room, Laura Rogers and Lori Gowan and a bunch of other people are going to be at the Ignite conference in Chicago. And you can go to ignite.microsoft.com and find out all about that. Laura and I are doing a full-day session on OneDrive for Business on Sunday there. And it's going to be everything you want to know about OneDrive for Business and how to bolt it into your on-prem SharePoint, and it's going to be the technical, weedsy, PowerShell-y stuff to get SharePoint connected to it and get Active Directory connected to it for, same sign-on, single sign-on kind of stuff. And then Laura's got a bunch of great tools and tricks on how you can find the data on-prem that you want to move to your OneDrive for Business, and ways to bolt it into Office so that your default, just all kinds of great stuff, but it's going to be the whole thing. So after you get out of that session on Sunday, you should have everything you need to know about OneDrive for Business if you've got Office 365, how to get your data in there, how to get it all bolted up, what makes good sense there, what doesn't. I'm very excited about that one. That's going to be, and there's so much to talk about. I'm going to be exhausted at the end of that day. And then I'm doing a session on Upgrade again. And this one is going to be kind of on Upgrade, but it's going to have the focus of getting yourself upgraded to SharePoint 2013 and getting in a space so that when SharePoint 2016 comes out, you're in good shape and you're ready to go. And I'm going to be doing that one. I don't think they've got the schedule up for that one as to what day that's going to be. And then I know Lori and Laura are doing a couple of sessions, or one session, I forget. So much stuff there. And that's at ignite.microsoft.com. The conference is not sold out, I don't think, but the hotels are getting scarce. So if you don't want to sleep in a dumpster next to a hobo, probably want to get signed up there. So thanks, chat room. I apologize. I didn't spend as much time interacting with you guys tonight because I was talking to Mark and having a good time, and very entertaining and very engaging. So thanks to him. I do have some other guests I've been talking to. I don't know how often I want to do guests yet. It seems to be working. I've had Bill Bear on, had Mark on, I've had Shane on. So I think the technical stuff, we've mostly got that figured out, and I know kind of what problems people are going to have. Not sure how often to have guests, and I'm probably going to run out of people willing to be on here sooner rather than later. But I'm curious to hear what your reaction is to the guests. If it's a good thing, if there's things you want to hear me talk about, if there's people you want me to try to get on, I'm happy to try to figure that out. Apparently, I had no idea. Laura in the chat room just said that there's apparently a party in my room all week at Ignite. Just crashed there. So I'm going to have to rethink that whole just getting a king-size bed. I may have to get some doubles and get some cots, couches, that kind of stuff. But it's going to be a good time. You're going to want to make sure you pack some energy bars and stuff like that, because Ignite's just going to wear you out. It's going to be too much. So, well, I think that's it. We're coming up on an hour here. So thanks, everybody. We'll be here the regular time next week, 8:30 Central. And thanks. Have a good night.